On the evening of March 8, 2014, Kuala Lumpur International Airport was alive with the usual hum of travelers and crew. Among the many departures that night was Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, a Boeing 777 scheduled to travel from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. It was supposed to be an ordinary 6-hour flight, carrying 227 passengers and 12 crew members. Families waved goodbye, children settled into their seats with excitement, and the crew prepared for what should have been routine. No one knew that this night would become one of the most haunting mysteries in modern aviation history. Flight MH370 pushed back from the gate at 12:42 a.m. and took off at 12:41 a.m. local time. The skies were clear, the aircraft was in excellent condition, and both pilots were experienced. Captain Zahari Omad Shah, 53 years old, had more than 18,000 hours of flying experience. His co-pilot, First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, was 27 and considered a rising star. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary. At 1:19 a.m., as the aircraft approached the Vietnamese airspace boundary, the last words from the cockpit were heard over the radio. "Good night, Malaysian 370. These calm, ordinary words were spoken by the co-pilot. It was the last confirmed communication from the plane. Just minutes later, MH370 vanished from civilian radar screens. At first, air traffic controllers assumed there was a technical glitch. Such things were rare but not impossible. They tried contacting the plane, but no response came. Minutes turned into hours. Families waiting in Beijing grew restless as the scheduled arrival time passed. Soon, confusion turned into fear. By dawn, it was clear. Flight MH370 was missing. The search began quickly. Initially, authorities believed the plane had gone down somewhere in the South China Sea, along its planned route. Dozens of ships and aircraft from multiple countries joined the mission, but as hours passed with no trace, strange information began to surface. Military radar data showed that after MH370's last civilian radar contact, the plane had turned sharply off course. Instead of continuing north toward Beijing, it veered west across the Malay Peninsula. It flew back over Malaysia, then out toward the Andaman Sea. This was not an accident. The plane's movements suggested deliberate control. Whoever was at the controls knew how to avoid civilian radar while still being tracked by military systems. But who was flying the plane and why? At 2:22 a.m., military radar lost contact as well. For a while, it seemed the trail had gone cold. Yet later, analysis revealed that the plane's satellite communication system, though disabled for regular communication, was still sending hourly handshakes to a satellite orbiting high above the Indian Ocean. These handshakes allowed investigators to estimate the plane's possible path. Astonishingly, the data suggested that MH370 flew for nearly 7 more hours after losing contact. Its final estimated location was somewhere deep in the southern Indian Ocean, one of the most remote and hostile environments on Earth. Theories began to swirl. Some believed there had been a catastrophic mechanical failure, but this didn't explain the sharp course change or the deliberate disabling of communication systems. Others suspected hijacking. Could terrorists have taken over the plane? Yet no group claimed responsibility, and there was no clear target. Another possibility was pilot involvement. Attention quickly turned to Captain Zahari. He was experienced and respected, but investigators discovered a troubling detail. On his home computer, Zahari had run a flight simulator program that included a route eerily similar to MH370's suspected final path into the Indian Ocean. Was this coincidence or a clue? Some argued that he had been rehearsing a suicide mission. Others dismissed it as circumstantial, noting that pilots often simulate all sorts of scenarios. The idea of pilot suicide was controversial. Zahari's family and colleagues insisted. He was not the type of man to deliberately harm himself or others. Yet history had examples. Egyptair Flight 990 in 1999 and LAM Mozambique Airlines Flight 470 in 2013 were both cases where pilots intentionally crashed their planes. Could MH370 be another? Meanwhile, the families of passengers lived a nightmare. In Beijing, relatives waited for news that never came. Many accused Malaysia Airlines and the government of withholding information. The handling of the crisis was chaotic, with conflicting reports and delayed announcements. Grief turned to anger as days stretched into weeks. Search efforts intensified. The southern Indian Ocean was combed by satellites, ships, and submarines. But the ocean is vast, and MH370's estimated crash zone was larger than many countries. Weeks turned to months, then years, with little progress. Finally, in July 2015, more than a year after the disappearance, a breakthrough occurred. A piece of debris lator, confirmed as a flaperon from a Boeing 777, washed ashore on Reunion Island, off the coast of Africa, thousands of miles from the search area. Over the next few years, more fragments were found in places like Madagascar and Mozambique. These confirmed that MH370 had indeed ended in the Indian Ocean. Yet the main wreckage, including the crucial black boxes, has never been found. The mystery of MH370 captivated the world, not only because of its scale, but because it raised deep, unsettling questions. How could a modern jetliner, equipped with advanced tracking systems, simply vanish? How could no one know what happened? During those final hours, several theories compete to this day. One theory suggests a fire or decompression event disabled communication and incapacitated the crew, leaving the plane to fly on autopilot until fuel ran out. But this doesn't explain the deliberate course change. Another theory points again to Zahari. Supporters of this theory argue that he carefully planned the event, depressurizing the cabin to render passengers unconscious, then flying south until fuel exhaustion. Critics say there is no concrete evidence to prove this, and Zahari's reputation as a skilled, respected pilot doesn't align with such an act. A third theory involves possible hijacking or sabotage. Some suggest that passengers or crew members could have taken over the plane. Others propose a more sinister angle. Could it have been an act of state-level interference? Rumors of sensitive cargo or passengers with political ties added fuel to conspiracy theories. Some even suggested the plane had been secretly landed at a remote location. Ideas ranged from hidden bases in Central Asia to islands in the Indian Ocean. None of these have ever been supported by credible evidence, but they reflect the desperation to explain the unexplainable. As time passed, frustration grew. Families pleaded for answers, while governments weighed the enormous cost of continuing the search. By 2017, the official search was suspended after covering more than 120,000 square kilometers of seabed. Private companies later conducted additional searches, but still found nothing. The absence of the main wreckage leaves haunting gaps. The black boxes, if ever recovered, could reveal the final minutes of MH370. They might show whether the pilots were conscious, whether the flight ended in a controlled ditching or a high-speed impact. and perhaps even why the plane changed course in the first place. Until then, the truth remains locked beneath the ocean. Beyond the technical and investigative aspects, MH370 touches on something deeper: the fear of the unknown. In an age where satellites track our every move and technology connects the world instantly, the disappearance of a massive jetliner with 239 souls on board feels almost impossible. And yet, it happened. This sense of impossibility is why the story continues to fascinate and disturb. For families, the lack of closure is unbearable. For the public, it's a reminder that even in our modern world, mysteries remain. To this day, MH370 represents not just an aviation disaster, but a human tragedy, a story of loss, unanswered questions, and the limits of our knowledge. And it leaves us with a haunting question: what really happened during those final hours over the Indian Ocean?